have with us Mr. Dav-Ernan sir, talking about the support for developing countries' capacity for sustainable production. Mr. Dave is the Executive Chairman of Dicon Developments. He is an experienced development consultant with over 27 years of experience in the management and execution of business projects, strategic planning, and 14 years at policy level in services sectors. He has served as the Vice Chair and Secretary for the CARIFORUM side of CARIFORUM EU EPA Consultative Committee and currently serves as the Chair for ACP Non-State Actors Network. As Secretary, Head of Secretariat of the Caribbean Association of Industry and Commerce, he has advanced the private sector interests in the accomplishment and alignment with the SDGs. Has been at the UNGA in 2017 with the Global Compact, and in 2018 worked with other Caribbean partners to launch the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance with the support of the UN. This was to help fund the SDGs through legacy funding by the private sector. Over to you, Mr. Dave, for your session.
So thank you, and thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure and great that the organizers have done this. I won't be able to go as fast as Nancy you did. That was really wow and powerful. And I hope that you'll be able to actually send this across as far and wide as you can, because that was great, Nancy. Thanks. It is really a pleasure to come connect with you here, even though I can't see who this will go to. In preparation for this presentation, the organizers had intimated about SMEs and the SDGs, that first of all, MSMEs can contribute to the sustainability reporting, and that secondly, MSMEs as a group can have significant social and environmental impacts. Those are true, and I want us to bear that in mind as we go along. We see here, you see my screen, I hope. So we see here that worldwide, globally, responsible consumption and production. Now, what we're looking at here is the green parts show where the SDG 12 was achieved, and the red parts show where there are significant challenges that are still there. So it's not achieved. You will notice that actually the red parts show some major developed countries. So one has to ask ourselves why, and why is it that the developed countries haven't made that change in itself. So we turn to globally. I don't need to remind everyone here that we are going through the pandemic. We all face it. So what has happened over the time with 2020 is that we see the decline taking place. Are you seeing my cursor moving? Anyway.
No, not. I can't see the cursor. I can.
All right. So anyway, hopefully you can see. But the light gray dotted line here is showing emerging economies, right? So what is going to happen here is that in 2021 and beyond, you're going to start to see an increase in demand and so on, increase in market dynamics and as things being consumed. And Nancy just spoke about that. In fact, that's one interesting revelation, that most of what we do will be thrown out and wasted within 6 months. That is so true. So let's understand what's going to happen. How is that demand going to be satisfied? Companies that were on slow or not working at all will start back up and start producing. Will they be producing with a fresh mandate? Will they have reinvested? Most likely not. Will there be re-engineering to take account of the changes that we are now being made more aware of as a result of the pandemic? I doubt that very much. So we have to really look at the production side. This is what this paper presentation will be focusing on. And I wanted to take two regions. One is the developed country focus, where I'm based now in terms of domicile area, which is in Canada. And their reports are showing that the worst results as a report as of 2019 were in SDG 12, and as a matter of fact in SDG 13, because of the high levels of CO2 emissions and pollution and threats to biodiversity. Now, again, we have to think about the entrenched production companies that are there, investments that have taken years to put in and billions of dollars. And in the Caribbean, I went back to look as far back as 2015, when there were 12 priority goals identified. And that is mainly because financing the SDGs would have been a challenge for the region. so that they focused on actually 12 of them. And unfortunately, SDG 12 was not one of them. And again, we started to think about why. So looking further afield, and Nancy touched on, well, not touched on it, went deeper into this. I like your points about looking at rethink. There is an interesting project or operation that I saw in my state some months ago, and it was rethink on food. As a matter of fact, I don't know how many of you are aware, but a lot of hotels, when at the end of the day, they throw out quite a lot of food because they can't use it, they can't keep it to the next day for customers. So what this company is actually doing is collecting that food, repackaging it, and distributing it out to as far and wide to needy persons. So, and it was actually not a small amount. It had reached, in fact, turnover of $1 million per month. So this whole idea of the demand side, as a matter of fact, what I want to actually present to you is how actually production side affects the demand side. So you're going to buy, the consumer is going to get and go through their purchases on the path of least resistance. Okay, so what is available is usually what they're going to get depending on the priority they place in it. So when they go to the supermarket, how are their consumption patterns driven? When they use their electricity at home, what do they use? Do they use the ones that last longer and are more environmentally friendly? And as a matter of fact, we're going to be digging down a little deeper into the whole area of electricity generation. And you'll note that 30% of electricity is used by household and household consumers. So how do we move from waste and pollution to RRR that Nancy spoke about? How do we look from mass consumption to renewables and energy efficiency? So again, treating with the issue of waste is of extreme importance. So looking at energy capacity in itself, in terms of renewable energy capacity, and I'm hoping that you're able to see the graph that is before you and still remember what I started the presentation with. So here we have actually the global renewable energy capacity worldwide. Right? Well, it's probably a good thing that we stuck on the first slide for a while, because now that is imprinted in your mind. And you can see here actually the same situation occurring. So this slide is actually showing you where there is renewable energy capacity. So the dark red is actually where it is at its highest. So what we have to understand is that the developed countries, mainly at the top here, and in between, even Australia continent, you will find that there is not a lot of renewable energy capacity that is being focused on. So again, think of why that is not happening and how we need to be able to interpret that, especially from an MSME sector. Okay, so moving along, and just like CNN and all of those, we have breaking news. In breaking news, yesterday there was an announcement of another 10 billion barrels of oil being discovered. Breaking news, but by Exxon, right? But in this breaking news, though, one of the things that they point to is that what they have injected into the Guyana economy is another 500 million in revenues into the economy, and probably another 800 new businesses that were started in the country. So this is now telling you, on the one hand, we are focusing on renewable energies and alternative sources of energy outside of fossil fuels. But on the other hand, we're celebrating these, which then fuel more businesses. So when do you think the change will take place? Right? So that's the significance here, and I want us to bear that in mind. So we go further into an organization within the Caribbean called CCRE, which is the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. And what I'm presenting here is a broad look at their strategic framework that is actually based on looking at renewable energy, a focus on a policy framework for it, which is important because, again, this is where we will derive the lead for the environmental factors that are there, any incentives, even any policies against the disruptive effects of the current way that we are actually operating. So what has happened is that there have been several years of developing of this center. And in 2016, they launched their strategic plan as a way forward. Now, where has it gone to? It is built actually on the basis of UNIDO's global network of sustainable energy centers. Okay, so what you'll find happening is that this model has already been created. It's a model and a framework that is going to allow us, both developing countries and even developed countries, to be able to move and look at the partnership on both sides between demand and to ensure quality supply. So even as Nancy was speaking before, there is a need for us to look at especially not only in terms of sustainable consumption, but how do we get sustainable consumption or responsible consumption through sustainable production? Because the way that we generate the things that we consume is actually part of an entire cycle. So what UNIDO were able to do here is actually look at the strategic areas of focus to be able to bring them together. And SECRE was one of the examples of a center that was able to bring a group of developing countries in the Caribbean to that state. By the way, just a reminder that Guyana is actually part of that Caribbean group. So getting further, the main goal is to find a level of equilibrium between demand and supply of the sustainable energy products and services, right? So just like the announcement that was made of the 500 million pumping back into the economy and the 800 or so new businesses that arose because of the platform of oil that was found, the reservoir. There is the opportunity for renewable energy sector and for investment in this to be able to look at value creating aspects, jobs, new services, and so on. The activities that are necessary here are going to be in terms of incentivizing the industries and the environment that is required to be built around sustaining these new production efforts. I wanted to dig even further into how this leads to policies and effects on the consumption side, right? So again, I'm making that linkage between responsible production to responsible consumption by looking at even some examples of the intermediaries. And at the UNGA in 2019, the Caribbean Association of Industry and Commerce, which is a regional private sector body within the Caribbean, discuss some of these areas in support of the SDG in terms of not only policy, but actually in terms of even changing consumption patterns and health habits based on work that is actually going on in the Caribbean. So the establishment of food and health standards at a regional level. Now, if you have food and health standards, it means that those production processes and even production content that don't meet those standards, what should happen with them? They should actually be rejected. If they're rejected, not rejected and sold to third world economies and so on, rejected and reused in some way or not made at all, right? So we should also work towards the reduction of salt, sugars, trans fats, and excessive alcohol. Why do I even have it here? Some of the major companies are actually wine and spirits and so on. So we want to actually look at that. However, what I wanted to highlight here, trans fats. Trans fats actually have no nutritional value. Well, what they do have is a commercial value, a very high commercial value. And do you think that that's why one of the reasons why the investments are not moving away from responsible production? It's possible, very highly possible. So moving on to what I call a conversion gap. Now, it seems, there is a saying that the only constant is change. But certainly there's a major aversion to change going on right now, where where in particular, in this time, there is uncertainty. But in the entrepreneurial world and in the business world, there's always uncertainty. So now there's uncertainty upon uncertainty, and it abounds, especially because of many big businesses are not even reinvesting in the new shifts that need to take place. So that's why the SDG realization seems a little further away. But again, the whole bit that we need to be aware of is what are the gaps that are there. So that's why I sort of put this in place here. The little picture that you see up the top left corner there is actually, if you think of a motorcycle track or motorcycle race, actually, if you don't make the corner, if you don't bend the corner and you will actually think it's the end of the road and you will fly off the course. So what needs to happen? Well, there needs to be investment, and so therefore reinvestment. There needs to be a level of retraining and reskilling. Over the lockdown periods, many economies, many societies were at home. Lots of people went online and did courses. Did they do new courses or the same courses that they were just added on to? So what has happened? As a matter of fact, there is a global report that suggests that probably about 1.5 billion youth in particular have been trained for the wrong areas of skills. So it's not actually changing with the new market requirements that there are. There's a risk of market loss due to timing. So if we get out of the market, we won't be able to get back in. If we try to retool and reskill and retrain. And then are there new sources of input that are available? So what I'm getting at is that there is a whole cycle that needs to be understood. It's a whole chain. So it's not only in one area that we can treat with as though it were just one silo that we were looking at. So this next slide, I actually want to, call a motivational gap, a motivation. What would take us over the conversion gap? What would push us there? So certainly economic policy that's going to be driven, by governments, the policy framers, and so on, with various incentives that get us there, and penalties for non-conformance, time even to be able to move out of the situation that we are in, and especially nowadays where governments have more control, it certainly should have been easier. But let's understand where their focus lies to deal with what's happening for the day. In fact, if we go to HR theory, there are theories on motivation by Mintzberg and Ulzberg that are probably applicable to even the global situation that we are in. The clustered approaches by sector, increasing public awareness. Nancy also just spoke about that too as well. The whole idea of changing our culture has to happen, even from a school level. The introduction of context and certainly disciplines that change our lifestyle and the way that we do things. The world, there were discussions globally about the introduction of a global tax and having whether it is 15% or 20%, and how do you treat with that? Where will that go to actually? That should actually go to even some global responses. Well, what I want to touch on as I close is the Global Compact on Business. And at the UNGA in 2019 in New York, I was actually quite pleased to hear the president of the ICC, which is the International Chambers of Commerce. We were there to actually launch a legacy program to achieve the SDGs by the private sector using philanthropists in the Caribbean region. But what he said that I still remember, and I didn't even have to write it down, is let's bring humanity back into business. I was actually quite pleased to hear that. So it made me go further into the Global Compact and its work. And the Global Compact actually has 10 principles that they have formulated for business, which includes certainly major areas of SDG12. But I wanted to highlight 3 of them that actually hit at SDG12 that quite directly. That businesses should support a precautionary approach to environmental challenges, that they should undertake initiatives to promote greater environmental responsibility, and to encourage the development and diffusion of environmentally friendly technologies. All right. So Really sorry that the slides didn't change as they should have. But this is, been a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dev, for that wonderful session. Thank you so much for joining us today. And as you mentioned, let us bring humanity back to business. Thank you so much. So next we have